Hello and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Cassidy. If it's not, thanks for always tuning into my videos. Today we are doing a list of some of my favorite hybrid genre books. If you don't know what a hybrid genre book is, it is just a book that encompasses more than one genre. Fantasy romance is like the biggest example of a hybrid genre, but there are a lot of them out there. And if you don't know, on top of that, I host a readathon in April, every April, called Realmathon. This year for Realmathon, one of the ways you can score points is by reading a hybrid genre book, so I figured I'd bring you this list full of some of my favorites. There's fantasy, sci-fi, horrors, thrillers, romance, anything you can think of, I think, on this list, to try and get you those bonus points for any realm that you choose to join in Realmathon. And if you're looking to hear more about Realmathon, the announcement video is linked in my description bar below. I really hope you join us. It's not too late to join until it's over, so pick a realm and join us. Let's start with one of my favorites, which is Ashes of the Sun, which is a fantasy book but has sci-fi elements and just a little bit of horror, but it is a fantasy sci-fi. This follows two siblings who were separated when they were quite young. Maya is taken to work for the Empire and she grows up in the Empire because she has a magical power, and Geyer, who is hurt by what the Empire does to his family and joins the rebellion and tries to take down the Empire. The fantasy in this obviously is very the world and the magic and all of that, but it is actually, according to the author, inspired by Star Wars, and you definitely can see some Star Wars influence in here. That's where you get all the sci-fi elements. There is a lot of sci-fi like elements within the tech in this, and some of those beings, constructs, creatures, things like that. I really love this series, and Mel did pick it as her host favorite, so you will get points for that, as well as hybrid genre on it. Maybe we'll roll through all my fantasy sci-fis first. Another one is the Dragon Riders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey. Don't want to explain too much about this to you, but it is fantasy sci-fi. There are lots of sci-fi elements within it. This is the second book, but I really loved the first book, Dragonflight. This follows a world where from the sky things are falling down to kind of kill it. And we need the Dragon Riders in order to save everybody, but over time the Dragon Riders have kind of lost their influence and they're no longer this like big strong force, and so they're kind of struggling to save the world. It's a lot of fun. There are dragon bonds within this that I loved, so if you like dragon fantasy you should read a classic, but definitely fantasy sci-fi. Another fantasy sci-fi is The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. I absolutely adored this book. This follows a world where every couple years aliens rain down on the world, and there are vampires that also have beasts that come and save the planet. Dragonflight and Ninth Reign have a lot in common when I'm thinking about it. Something happened in the 8th reign and the vampires lost their immortality and the beasts are no longer a thing, so they can't come save the humans because we're meek little humans and can't save ourselves. So what's gonna happen when the 9th reign comes and the aliens come to murder us? There's a lot of sci-fi in this. A lot. I mean the term alien, obviously. And then just how the world is crafted, a lot of sci-fi in there as well. I highly recommend this series. I really enjoyed this first book, one of the coolest worlds I've ever. Let's move on to fantasy horror because I do have a couple of those. My first is a graphic novel or a comic recommendation, which is Lock and Key. This is a comic series created by Joe Hill, which if you don't know is the son of Stephen King. This, if you've seen the Netflix show, you won't think it's horror, but the comic really gravitates towards the horror side. It's one of my favorite comics that I've read. It's also a TV show that I really love. This follows the Locke family who, when their father dies, they go back to his house that he grew up in, and within the house they're starting to find magical keys that unlock certain things and do magical things, but there is a horror side to this because there is like a big bad and a lot of horrific elements. I really recommend this one. I actually do know that they are on KU, and I plan on continuing these at some point during the month of April. I hope you'll pick it up as well. Another one for fantasy horror is Along the Razor's Edge. I may be stretching this just a little bit, but I'm saying it counts, so you can count it. We follow Eska, who is a soldier and a sorcerer of one army, and in the final battle, she surrenders, which then puts her in the pit, where the pit is where all the dangerous criminals go. The first book is her trying to escape the pit, and there is a lot of sci-fi within the magic system of this book, but I think I would call it more fantasy horror than fantasy sci-fi because of the intricacies of demons within this series. I'm not sure the first book necessarily fully fits this, but later on in the series it definitely fits fantasy horror, so I'm counting the entire series as a hybrid genre split, and there you go. Another fantasy horror is Daughter of Red Winter. Now, I don't think you could count this if you're on the horror team as like your own genre, but if you could still count it as like a hybrid genre. Daughter of Red Winter follows a world where if you can see ghosts, this is bad. But we follow a main character who can see the ghosts, and she's kind of getting herself in a lot of trouble by the fact that she sees them. I don't really know how to explain this book, so that's the synopsis you're getting. Oops. And then to go along with fantasy horror, I do have a fantasy mystery, which is The Swordsman's Lament by G.M. White. This is an indie. I also forgot to mention earlier that Along the Razor's Edge is a host favorite and indie, so lots of points there. This follows a murder mystery plotline in a fantasy setting, so counts as a hybrid genre for that. And we follow the King's Champion, who is accused of murder and has to prove his innocence. It's pretty much all you need to know about it. It's very low fantasy, it's short, it's a great time. Let's move into sci-fi horror, which is actually one of my favorite genre blends possible. My first recommendation is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This follows a team of scientists and TV personnel who go on this ship to investigate mermaids. One ship previously already went down by killer mermaids, and so this ship is going to like see if it's actually true or if it was a hoax. There's a whole big thing. So you're following a team of scientists and there's killer mermaids, and that's pretty much all I think you need to know. This book is incredible. It's so much fun. I really enjoyed it, and it also has a novella that's great as well called Rolling into the Deep. This is a host favorite. Mel did everyone a solid and put it as her favorite, and that'll get you points there. This is so good. I cannot recommend this book more. And then for a sci-fi thriller, I have Recursion by Blake Crouch. Honestly, any book by Blake Crouch. I'm not the biggest fan of Upgrade, but both Recursion and Dark Matter are sci-fi thrillers. And Recursion is my favorite, but I think more people prefer Dark Matter. Recursion follows a cop who is on the case of figuring out why people keep waking up with like random memories of a new life, and you just kind of see that progress, and I really love this one. Dark Matter is also amazing, and Dark Matter follows a man who wakes up in a parallel universe. Let's move into a horror romance. And we have Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. This follows a character who wakes up in a stranger's house and finds out that they cannot go outside because there are zombies outside. And she doesn't know who to trust, and there's a bunch of stuff that happens, but there is a romance plotline that is a significant portion of Voices in the Snow, so it counts as a genre blend. I love Darcy Coates, so I always recommend Darcy Coates, but for a hybrid genre, 100% Voices in the Snow. Continuing with horror romance, we have Satan's Affair, which is an indie book. You can get points for that. Darcy Coates is also indie, so you'll get points for that. And Satan's Affair is what I call horror erotica, but we follow Libby, who spends her time in the walls of a carnival. She murders the bad people who come in to the carnival. And that's all I'm going to tell you. This is a book that takes strange turns. I remember reading this book and thinking, what the frick am I reading? I hate this book, and then coming back a sprint later and being like, 4 stars, I freaking love this book. So I highly recommend this. Just know you're in for a lot of like erotica, but I think the book is chef's kiss. Another horror, romance, fantasy, it kind of crosses a lot of bounds, maybe even sci-fi because it's vampires, is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, which is a host favorite. Riley put it on her host favorite list, and for the purpose of Realmathon, it does count as indie just because I gave books that were indie but picked up by traditional publishers like a year. So because it was published again traditionally in the last year, we're still counting it as indie. This follows Dracula's bride and is kind of the retelling of Dracula's bride. There is a romance within the story, and I think it's a beautiful romance. There's also horror elements, and there's also, I feel like, fantasy elements. I love this. Love, love, love this. This is such a solid recommendation. It's short too, but it's a brilliant book. I never expected that I would have loved this, but when I read it, it's a favorite. And the writing is just very beautiful in the way it's told. Highly, highly, highly recommend this one. And another thriller romance is the Mind F series by St. Abbey, which spells stabby and is a genius pen name for a thriller romance. This is a series of 5 novellas. They are indie, and they follow a serial killer and a detective who are falling in love. And the detective does not know that he's falling in love with the serial killer. And it's just, I mean, don't enter Mind F for the romance. I do think that the romance and the smut is not as great, but the thriller plotline is really fun. And I do like the connection of also their character development because they are together and how that affects the story. I really enjoyed this one. I think it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. It's a fun little genre blend, so I hope you enjoy it too. And then to close it off, we have some fantasy romance. My number one recommendation for a fantasy romance is the Bridge Kingdom series. I love the Bridge Kingdom series. The 4th book actually, I believe, comes out this month, so I plan to read it in April. The Bridge Kingdom is a series of 3 duologies, and I think it's really fun. It has a perfect blend for me of fantasy and romance. It hits the mark 50-50 for me, and I hope you enjoy it. The first book in the Bridge Kingdom series follows our character who grew up and was trained to kill someone in another nation, and in order to do that, they have an arranged marriage. So much fun banter in this. I really enjoyed it. I also really like the world in this. I think it's really cool. The second book has a desert setting, which I love, and then the 3rd book follows 2 new characters who are going to fall in love. And then the 5th book will also do that when that comes out. I really enjoyed this one, and if you're looking for some slight romance, I recommend it. I think it's a perfect spot for fantasy readers who want to get into romance, but also romance readers who want to get into fantasy. And to end off my recommendation list, I'm going to leave you with From Blood and Ash, which doesn't need the recommendation, but I do love the first couple books in the From Blood and Ash series. I have not continued on yet, so I probably should do that maybe in April, but this is a series that follows Poppy, who is the maiden. What this means is she's not allowed to be touched, she's a virgin. She's never really thought more about it until her guard comes, and her guard kind of makes her start feeling new things. I can see my paper here. And from there, things start to happen, and you figure out a lot of stuff. The banter in these books is chef's kiss for me. I absolutely adored them, and I really need to continue. There we go. There's a bunch of hybrid genres for you. I really hope that you find a hybrid genre to read and explore throughout Realmathon, and it's just a little love I have currently in reading. I think if you can encompass more than one genre, it adds to some like uniqueness because you're taking tropes out of another genre and adding it to a new genre, which is a lot of fun, especially when you're reading a lot. If you know any hybrid genres, give me some recommendations down below. Let me know if you're reading any of these in April or in general. Like, I made this list for any month as well, just if you want hybrid genre recommendations. Doesn't have to be just in April that you read them. And then if you'd like to just let me know you were here, you can leave me a rain emoji or like an umbrella. And then if you want to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon, all linked in the description bar below. A reminder that the Realmathon announcement and anything you need to know about that is linked in the description bar below as well. And have yourselves a remarkable day.